Hello and welcome to Cinema to the Letter. For this bonus episode, we're announcing our lineup for Season 8, Criterion. On regular episodes of Cinema to the Letter, we break down the very nature of cinema, letter by letter. For each episode of a film miniseries topic, we cover 6 films that fit as C for classic, I for indie, N for new, E for egregious, M for masterpiece, and A for atypical. Because who doesn't love an acronym, am I right? I am Thomas, recording here in a Criterion closet of my own making, in that I buy a lot of Criterions and put them on shelves around me.
Hi, I'm Bryan, and I am in the Criterion closet on the go.
That's true. That's how you normally drive around places, is in the Criterion van?
With all of my Criterions in my car. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you drive over to the film festivals, but you go really blue collar with it. Like, you got like a cigarette, just like, all right, come in next. All right, yeah, come on, yeah, pick out the true foes. We need to get rid of them true foes. But yes, so as you can tell from us talking here, for this bonus episode, we're announcing for season 8 our topic of Criterion related movies. So basically, if you don't know out there, the Criterion Collection, which started 40 years ago, this very year that we're at least starting the season in, is this boutique physical media service that has made many like laser discs, DVDs, Blu-rays, 4Ks, etc. of premier titles that they put in their collection. Usually, kind of like your more hoity-toity fancy kind of stuff that has like these great transfers and a lot of extras, that kind of deal. And Bryan and I are fans in that we both own a lot of Criterion, some of which are still probably shrink-wrapped and we haven't opened them yet, because we buy them during every sale that happens in July and November, including like currently in November when we're recording this. So at some point we're going to be trying to get to the nearest Barnes & Noble to get more fucking discs for ourselves. But we're big fans, right, Bryan? You can agree with that?
Yeah, and I think like many film fans, I'm sure, Criterion really introduced me to a lot of world cinema, art house cinema, just all kinds of movies, and it's kind of easy to make fun of them for a few things they do, but it's kind of impossible to deny just the incredible impact they have on just movies and just kind of especially younger audiences like myself. I grew up with when Hulu had the Criterion Collection on there, and I watched that's how I watched Breathless for the first time. It's how I watched fucking Kurosawa movies for the first time. So yeah, they're a huge deal, I think, for just cinema in general.
We wanted to devote a particular season to Criterion stuff, and while we were planning this out, we kind of came to certain rules of eligibility, because obviously there's a lot of different parameters for Criterion where, like I mentioned, they did a lot of laser discs back in the day, some of which wouldn't maybe be ones one would consider Criterion worthy, like the first laser disc ever of Ghostbusters was released by Criterion. But most would not consider that maybe part of the collection. And there's also the actual Criterion Collection streaming service, which we're both fans of, but puts out plenty of movies that don't have physical editions necessarily. Like Josie and the Pussycats was on there one time, and we're not necessarily considering that eligible, even if it is a great movie. We're not going to talk about it for this particular season. So Bryan and I came to the ultimate conclusion that if it has a spine number, which most Criterions that are part of the official collection have a spine number attached to them, they are fully eligible, even if they're out of print. One of the ones that we're going to be talking about is technically out of print from its DVD version. But as long as it has a number, it is eligible for this particular season.
Yeah, pretty fair rule set, I would say.
Right. And I should just shout out that we've covered a couple films that are part of that kind of eligibility in the collection, because we've covered, for example, Rashomon, which is spine number 138 in the Criterion Collection. 2 of the Godzilla movies we covered, Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, are part of Spine number 1000, because that's the big Showa era box set. And then also very recently, The Others, which is a very recent edition, Spine number 1195. So a few movies, and just from that sampling, very different movies on like every level.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cool thing about Criterion is that they, will put out like the sort of, art house movies you typically think of them as, but then, like you mentioned, they'll put out Wally, which is an incredible film. So, yeah, it's a great variety of movies as well.
Right, as will be evidenced by our season, which, along with kind of the eligibility thing with like the spine number, I was very determined on this, and we both really agreed that like we wanted to do as many diverse, different movies as possible for our Criterion season. Basically, we wanted to have like 6 very different movies that didn't feel like very similar to each other at all, and I think we accomplished that, as we'll detail in a moment with our lineup. Right, Bryan?
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good lineup of just a bunch of different kinds of movies. So. Yeah, shall we get into it?
Well, let's go ahead and get into it. Yeah, of course. Let's announce our lineup with our schedule and everything. Which, keep in mind, this is we're going to be starting in December, so the holidays are kind of might impede some things. We'll kind of talk about that. So the dates are at least what we're planning on, given some things like holiday issues or maybe acts of God for us in Florida here might prevent certain things from coming out in time, but this is roughly what we're planning on for the schedule. So, first up, our C for Classic will be the 1967 French film, which is Spine number 112 on the Criterion Collection, planning to come out on December 3rd, Playtime, Jacques Tati's film, which I had not seen before this, and I was actually introduced to Tati via this particular episode as part of research, and we wanted to do a French movie. And we figured Tati and Playtime would be an interesting one to do.
Yes, as surely, of course, we'll discuss in the episode, but this is one of my favorite movies, maybe of all time. I have a really, really deep love for this movie, and the more times I see it, the more times I just like fall in love with it, and just like it brings me so much joy. And yeah, I did kind of fight for this one because I think it's like an incredible film, which we'll talk about in that episode, of course, but. Yeah, also a great French movie to be very specifically like French because of its setting and all of that stuff. So yeah, great movie.
That's true, by the way. He did fight me, folks. I have a shiner. Because Bryan punched me in the face to be like, we're covering Playtime, motherfucker.
Jacques Tati, and then I hit him.
But then after that, our eye for indie is the Pedro Almodovar film, Spine 1012. Which we're planning on putting out on December 10th. All About My Mother from 1999, which I have seen, but Bryan hasn't. And I'm a bit more versed in Almodovar in general. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any extent, but I think this is an interesting one to particularly cover. It's a more recent addition to the collection, also celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And it'll be interesting to dig into Almodovar, who has a couple movies in the collection, and definitely is like a great filmmaker to kind of introduce people to especially Spanish cinema.
Yes, ironically, I have not seen any Almodovar movies, so this will be really fun. And I think it's also just fun because he has a new movie coming out at some point. I don't know how the release will work in the U.S., but I forget the title of it. But it's the with Julianne Moore and who's the other actress in it? Julianne
Tilda.
Moore and Tilda Swinton, of course. Yes.
By the way, The Room Next Door was the name of that movie. It's his first English language film, full English language at least, not like the short film with Ethan Hawke and fucking Peter Pascal as gig counts.
Oh yes, yeah,
right, yeah. But yeah, so they'll be our eye for indie. Then our N for new, which shout out our patrons, our cineast patrons over at patreon.com/cinema number 2 letter, voted for this particular one, which ended up being a very recent addition to the Criterion Collection, Spine 1226, which we're planning on putting out December 17th. Perfect Days, the Wim Wenders film. Very recent movie that I saw in theaters earlier this year. Now it's already got a Criterion edition coming out. And I've seen a couple of Wim Wenders films, including this one. I'm excited to talk about it and cry once again as I watch it. But you have not seen this one yourself, Bryan.
No. Had a weird theatrical release with Neon. And I just missed it in theaters, but I do really love quite a few of Wim Wenders' movies. I think he has a fascinating career, very weird career as well. And I love, my God, what is his name? Koji Yakusho. I love him, that actor in that movie. So, yeah, I'm excited to finally see this movie because I've heard so many good things about it, and it had like one of the best trailers of like recent memory, I think.
Very true, yes. And now we should note that will be the last episode of 2024 because we realized while we were planning out and kind of realized like, oh, we're gonna start it in December. That the next 2 Tuesdays after that are Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So we decided like, you know what, y'all are gonna be busy. Y'all aren't gonna listen to those episodes, so we're taking a holiday break. No episodes for those last 2 Tuesdays. So you can enjoy those first 3 episodes and save them up and wait until January 7th, 2025, starting the brand new year with our E for Egregious pick. Starting off on such a good note, our E for Egregious, as we talk about a movie that's another one that's a part of a set, in that it's part of Spine number 1036, the Bruce Lee Greatest Hits. We'll be talking about Game of Death from 1978, the last film that Bruce Lee had any involvement in because of the circumstances of his tragic death during the production and the resulting film that has received a lot of controversy because of its sort of like kind of exploitation of Lee. But at the same time, it was hard to pick an E for Egregious for Criterion. But we figured this one has a lot of interesting ways to branch out, particularly talking about, martial arts films and Hong Kong cinema and Bruce Lee in general would be very fascinating to really diversify stuff with the collection. I've seen a couple of the Bruce Lee movies. There's only 5 of them. I've seen a couple of the other ones, like Enter the Dragon. But yeah, I have not seen this particular one. And Brian, you haven't seen any Bruce Lee, right?
No, unfortunately, the closest I've come is just parodies of him, and of course the kind of weird inclusion of him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Weirdly enough,
Right.
But yeah, I have just never gotten around to any of the Bruce Lee films. Just martial arts cinema in general, I'm very just not aware of really. So yeah, very very interested to do that, especially because he's one of those figures who is so iconic, just like the look of him, and it's been parodied in like cartoons and whatever, and it'll be finally kind of cool to just see him and what kind of he was at, what his persona in films was actually like. So yeah.
Yes, we'll dive into that at the start of 2025 as we continue into the latter half of our Criterion season, which will also keep going with on January 14th our M for Masterpiece pick, Spine number 536. We're diving finally into the filmography of Terrence Malick as we cover The Thin Red Line from 1998. And I've seen a couple of Malick's. I haven't seen this one, and I'm curious to get into it because I was kind of frustrated with him in college, and I kind of avoid a lot of his movies as well. So we'll be curious to talk about that because, in contrast, you love Malick dearly, correct?
Yeah, I'm a huge Malick head. I love all of his movies. Yes, all of them. And weirdly enough, I think The Thin Red Line, of course we'll talk about it, but like it's a masterpiece, and it's not even in my top 3 Terrence Malick films. I love his work. I think he is just one of the greatest American filmmakers, and I love The Thin Red Line. I think it's such a fascinating movie to talk about with Malick. Of course, it's after his about 20-year absence from Hollywood, from filmmaking. So yeah, that, and just the massive cast, and just what a weird production it was, and certain people being cut out of the movie and not being happy about it. It's a fascinating discussion, and yeah, of just one of my favorite living artists.
Yes, then finally, our A for Atypical, which we plan on putting out on January 21st, is the out-of-print one that I was kind of referencing earlier, from 1979, spine number 61 in the Criterion Collection. We will be talking about Monty Python's Life of Bryan, which is more to the contrast with what we were talking about earlier with you and Malick. I am a deep Monty Python fan, and I'm very curious to finally talk about Python in general and kind of get into that element of it, especially with what I would argue is the movie of theirs that feels the most like a cohesive movie, instead of a series of sketches barely strung together by a story or theme. Hence why I think it's probably why it was the one that was in the Criterion Collection to some degree. And I know you have seen Holy Grail, but you haven't seen as much of the other Python stuff, right?
No, yeah, I've seen Holy Grail a few times actually. I love that movie. I think it's absolutely hilarious. And I have a bit of a rocky relationship with kind of Terry Gilliam in general. Terry Jones, I'm not as familiar with, but and the other Monty Python crew, but I am curious because I do love Holy Grail, and I love the whole vibe of Monty Python, just kind of the art style of like the that they use for like the kind of intertitles, in like in Holy Grail and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm quite interested in the rest of the Monty Python work or whatever you call it.
The Python Pantheon, perhaps?
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so we'll just repeat here the schedule as is planned. On December 3rd, our C for Classic Playtime. On December 10th, our I for Indie, All About My Mother. On December 17th, our N for New Perfect Days. And then we're taking Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve off. And then starting back up on January 7th, our E for Egregious Game of Death. Then on January 14th, our M for Masterpiece The Thin Red Line. And then finally, on January 21st, our A for Atypical Monty Python's The Life of Bryan. Now, that's not the only stuff we're doing around this time, because over on the Patreon, once again, patreon.com/cinema, number 2 letter, we'll be doing some bonus stuff, as we tend to do, including for November and December, we'll have 2 different review roundups where we'll be talking about a lot of the big Oscar stuff that's coming out. I know Bryan and I have seen a couple of these things I'm sure we'll cover, like Juror Number 2 or Nora for the November one. And then in December, there's a lot of big movies coming out, so we'll be doing big review roundups where we talk about all sorts of different movies that are coming out near the end of the year. And then there'll also be stuff like Marco Polo, the Adult Swim podcast I do with Tori DePina, friend of the show, where, we would have recently put out our episode where we talked about tropical cocktails and Joe Parra Talks with You, with our first ever guest, Scott Johnson, who has been on the Patreon as well. But also we'll be talking about in December our Christmas-themed one, where we talk about Aqua Teen Hunger Force again, and also an episode of Family Guy, really to match up with the Criterion Collection season.
Oh, yeah, when's Family Guy going to be in the Criterion Collection?
That's true. The entire series. Remember that time I was in the Criterion Collection, Lois?
Get Peter Griffin in the closet right now.
What do you think?
I need to know
Griffin's going to gravitate toward?
I need to know what he thinks of fucking Andrei Tarkovsky or whatever.
Stalker's my favorite. But we'll also be doing in November, our big bonus podcast, we'll be doing a cinematic triptych for November, where we kind of talk about 3 music documentaries that might have probably come out by now, given, this is coming out near the end of November, and hopefully would have recorded that already. It's an episode that Bryan is taking the helm on as he talks about these different music documentaries, so it'll be interesting to, see how that goes. And then in December, our big bonus podcast is one that Bryan and I have been cooking up for a while, because in December, we're marking the 35th anniversary of a favorite show of Bryan and mine. We're going to be talking about The Simpsons, specifically ranking our top 10 Simpsons episodes. Maybe our most, difficult episode to prepare for that we've ever done, Bryan. It's so difficult and daunting to think about already. I haven't even started putting together that list. It's so ugh. Well, how do I whittle this down to 10? I'm guessing you're in a similar mode?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always in some kind of state of watching a bunch of The Simpsons constantly. So I feel like I'm always kind of preparing for it in a way, but I have not even started to formulate my list. I just will watch one of the great episodes and be like, yeah, that's a great episode. I should put that in there. But yeah, it's really daunting to even start to think about that now.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be in December. But yeah, that is our plan over on patreon.com/cinema number 2 letter, where you can either pay the $1 a month and become, a loyal patron and get all the stuff, or you can buy individual stuff for $3, which is the lowest price you can do because Patreon fees and whatnot. But you can buy individual pieces of audio if you want to sample and whatnot for the $3, and then just doing for the $1 a month. It really helps out the show, keeps the main feed on, and allows us to experiment on stuff over at the Patreon really helps. And also, you get to choose stuff. Like we mentioned, our patrons end up choosing the End for New choice, and I'm sure by the end of this particular season, we'll have a poll up where we announce, like, hey, you guys get to pick whatever other thing is for the next season. We always try and do that, at least either one episode or even a whole topic you'd get to pick as a patron for that, with the poll and whatnot. But yeah, on that note, let's go ahead and wrap up this bonus episode. We want to just shout out thanks to Burial Grid for all of our music on the show. I'll purchase this music at burialgrid.com. Thanks to Michelle Kyle for her artwork. You can find her at MishKyle96 over on Twitter. And if you want to follow us, whatever hell site you're perusing, we're at Cinema Number 2 Letter on there. And you can also find me over on mainly Letterboxd, is at Not the Who's Tommy. But I also do occasionally some writing at film-credit.com.
Yeah, you can also follow me on Twitter if you really want to, at BRYANDRADE and the number 3, or like Thomas, you can follow me on Letterboxd. Probably a better and safer place on the internet to follow me.
Oh, did something happen, Brian? Is something happening with Twitter right now?
No, everything's great right now. The world is great. Right. It's fantastic.
Right.
And I'm sure even better by the time this comes out.
Oh, probably. So good. Yeah. But on that note, even if things are going to hell, you can subscribe to us and listen to us over on Apple Podcasts or other podcasting platforms. Or you can also listen to all the great stuff on Talk Film Society, our podcasting network. So many great shows you can listen to occupy your time. And you can also dig into the archives on our Podbean main feed for the previous 7 seasons of this show, and also all the old double-edged double bill stuff over there at that Podbean main feed. And nothing else, if you can't, support us on the Patreon, that's cool. Money's tight for some people in these trying times. The completely free way to help us out, though, is to rate, review, or simply share the show around to give us more visibility. We need to get out of this Criterion closet, everybody. Everyone needs to partake. So please, just spread our word around of our great show that everyone loves. But on that note, we'll go ahead and just tease our next episode once again. Our first full episode of the Criterion season, our C for Classic episode, will be on Playtime. That's coming out next time. But until then, everybody, Brian, you got to help me out with I have so many Criterions in this bag they gave me for the closet. I need another forklift. Can you use the Criterion mobile one?
It's like the fucking Safties Criterion closet video. They robbed it.
That's true. You need to help me out, Brian. Pull it up. Come on, back it up. Back it up so we can use the mobile Criterion to move all my other Criterions from the main closet.